The cargo hold of the smuggler's ship stank of fear and blood. In the darkness, something massive moved against its restraints, testing the limits of the energy cage that held it prisoner. The creature was known across 12 systems as a Varkesh, apex predator of the jungle moon Thalkor. Its scales rippled with bioluminescent patterns that pulsed red with rage. 4 eyes glowed like burning coals in the shadows, and its 6-limbed body coiled with deadly purpose. The smugglers had made their fortune trafficking exotic creatures to wealthy collectors who cared nothing for galactic law. The Varkesh represented their biggest prize yet. On the black market, a living Varkesh could fetch enough credits to buy a small planet. But they had miscalculated. They always did when it came to predators protecting their young. The ship shuddered as it dropped out of hyperspace near a human research station orbiting a green and blue world. The smugglers had chosen this route precisely because it was remote, unpatrolled, perfect for their illegal business. They never expected the collision with a debris field that sent their vessel spinning toward the planet below. Alarms screamed through the corridors. The smugglers scrambled for escape pods, abandoning their cargo without a second thought. In the chaos, the power flickered. The energy cage holding the Varkesh weakened for just 3 seconds. That was all the creature needed. With a roar that shook the bulkheads, the Varkesh tore through its prison. Metal screamed. Circuits exploded in showers of sparks. The beast moved through the dying ship like liquid death, searching desperately through compartment after compartment. Its cubs had been taken from it days ago. It could still smell them, faint traces scattered throughout the vessel. The mother Varkesh followed those precious scents, even as the ship plummeted through the atmosphere, hull plates beginning to glow red with friction heat. Down on the surface, Dr. Sarah Chen looked up from her datapad as the emergency beacon flashed across her screen. Her small research outpost was the only human presence on this entire moon. A modest collection of prefabricated domes dedicated to studying the local ecosystem. She had a staff of 12, all scientists and support personnel who had chosen this quiet post specifically because nothing exciting ever happened here. "We've got a distress signal," she called out to her team. "Ship coming down hot, about 40 kilometers northwest." Her second-in-command, Marcus Webb, pulled up the trajectory data, his weathered face creased with concern. "That's not a controlled descent. They're going to crash." Sarah made the decision in seconds. "Prep the rescue shuttle. We move in 15 minutes." By the time they reached the crash site, the smuggler's ship was a burning skeleton sprawled across a rocky valley. Fires still raged along its length, and chunks of hull were scattered across hundreds of meters. Sarah's team approached cautiously, scanning for survivors. The ship's cargo manifest was encrypted, but the broken containment units told their own story. "This was a smuggling vessel," Marcus said quietly, examining the specialized cages. "Animal trafficking by the look of it." Sarah felt her stomach turn. She had dedicated her life to protecting creatures, not exploiting them. "Spread out. Check for survivors, human or otherwise." That was when they heard it, a sound so small and frightened that it barely registered over the crackling flames. Sarah followed the noise to a half-crushed cargo pod that had been thrown clear of the main wreckage. Inside, huddled together in terror, were 3 infant Varkesh. She knew what they were immediately. Varkesh were legendary, their intelligence and ferocity studied but rarely witnessed. These cubs were each about the size of a large dog, their scales still soft and underdeveloped. They mewled pitifully, their bioluminescent patterns flickering in distress patterns. One had a badly injured leg, bleeding green blood onto the pod's floor. "Oh no," Sarah whispered. "Marcus, bring the medical kit." "Now." She approached slowly, hands visible, voice low and soothing. The cubs backed away at first, hissing with tiny fangs bared. But they were babies, scared and hurt. And when Sarah sat down at the pod's entrance and simply waited, Speaking softly about nothing in particular, their fear began to fade. It took an hour of patience, of soft words, of slowly extending her hand for them to sniff. The injured cub made the first move, dragging itself forward on 3 legs, its 4 eyes studying her with unexpected intelligence. When it finally pressed its scaled head against her palm, Sarah felt tears sting her eyes. "It's okay," she murmured. "You're safe now, I promise." Back at the outpost, Sarah and her team worked through the night. The injured cub needed surgery on its leg, a delicate procedure that required all of Sarah's veterinary training. The other 2 cubs refused to leave their sibling's side, watching every move with those unsettling, intelligent eyes. "We need to report this," Marcus said as Sarah finished bandaging the cub's leg. "Varkesh are protected. Those smugglers will have authorities looking for this cargo." "In the morning," Sarah replied. She was exhausted, running on adrenaline and coffee. "Right now, these babies need rest and food. Do we have anything that matches their nutritional requirements?" They improvised a formula from their supplies, and to Sarah's relief, the cubs ate hungrily. As the station's artificial night cycle began, the 3 infants curled together in a climate-controlled pen, their patterns finally settling into the soft blues and greens that indicated contentment. Sarah dozed in a chair beside them, unable to leave them alone. She dreamed of jungles she had never seen, of creatures moving through ancient trees, of eyes watching from shadows. She woke to alarms. The perimeter sensors were going insane, detecting something massive moving toward the outpost at incredible speed. Sarah ran to the control room where Marcus was already pulling up external cameras. What they saw made her blood run cold. A fully grown Varkesh was approaching the outpost. It was enormous, easily 4 meters tall at the shoulder, its 6 limbs carrying it across the ground with terrifying grace. Scorch marks and wounds covered its body, evidence of its escape from the burning ship. But it was the creature's eyes that held Sarah frozen. They blazed with intelligence and desperate purpose. "Lock down the facility," Marcus ordered. "That thing will tear through our walls like paper." "No," Sarah said suddenly. "Don't lock down. Open the outer doors." "Are you insane? It's looking for its cubs." Sarah was already moving, running back to the medical bay where the infant slept. "That's a mother, Marcus. She's not here to kill us. She's here to find her babies." "You're betting all our lives on that assumption." "Yes." Sarah reached the medical bay and began shutting down the security barriers on the pen. "Yes, I am." The mother Varkesh hit the outpost perimeter at a dead run. Warning shots from the automated defenses didn't slow it. Nothing would have stopped that creature from reaching her young. But when the outer airlock doors opened instead of closing, when she found no resistance, only an open path, the Varkesh slowed. She moved through the corridors like a living nightmare, too large for the human-sized spaces, her scales scraping the walls. Her bioluminescent patterns pulsed with aggression, with fear, with the desperate need to find what had been stolen from her. Every sense was focused on following the scent trail of her cubs. Sarah stood in the medical bay doorway, the 3 infant Varkesh behind her. She had positioned herself between the cubs and the entrance, though she knew she would be nothing but an obstacle to a creature that could tear her apart without effort. Her team had evacuated to secure positions, but Sarah had refused to leave. The mother Varkesh rounded the corner at full speed, then stopped so abruptly that her claws gouged tracks in the floor. For a long moment, predator and human stared at each other. Sarah could see every detail, the creature's heaving sides, the dried blood on her scales, the absolutely lethal intelligence in those burning eyes. The Varkesh could have killed her in a heartbeat. Instead, the cubs called out. Their tiny voices, so different from their mother's bone-deep roar, filled the silence with joyful recognition. The mother Varkesh's entire demeanor changed. The aggressive red of her patterns shifted to brilliant golds and greens. She moved forward, but slowly now, carefully, her eyes never leaving Sarah's face. It was a question, Sarah realized. A request for permission. Sarah stepped aside. The reunion was both beautiful and heartbreaking. The mother Varkesh folded her massive body down, gathering her cubs against her with surprising gentleness. She inspected each one with careful attention, her scaled snout checking for injuries, her rumbling purr of relief vibrating through the floor. When she found the bandaged leg on the smallest cub, she went very still. Sarah held her breath. This was the moment. This was when the mother would realize that humans had touched her baby, treated its wound. Would she understand? Or would instinct take over? The mother Varkesh lifted her head and looked directly at Sarah. For a long moment, their eyes met across species barriers, across the vast gulf between predator and primate. Then, slowly, deliberately, the Varkesh lowered her massive head in what could only be a gesture of acknowledgement, perhaps even gratitude. "You're welcome," Sarah whispered. Over the next 3 days, an understanding developed that nobody on the research team could quite believe. The mother Varkesh, who they began calling Copper for the metallic sheen of her scales, remained near the outpost. She hunted in the surrounding forests, bringing back fresh kills to share with her cubs. But she also began bringing offerings to the humans, leaving carefully selected prey animals near the main entrance. Sarah studied Copper with fascination. The Varkesh was far more intelligent than most research suggested. She communicated through her bioluminescent patterns, a complex language that Sarah began to recognize, contentment patterns, warning patterns, the specific flicker that meant she was checking on her cubs. Copper even seemed to understand that the injured cub needed continued treatment, allowing Sarah to change bandages while the mother watched with protective but not aggressive attention. "This is unprecedented," Marcus admitted, watching Copper demonstrate hunting techniques to her cubs in a clearing near the outpost. "Varkesh are supposed to be solitary except for mating. They're supposed to be too dangerous for any contact." "Maybe we never gave them a chance," Sarah said. "Maybe we just assumed because they're apex predators that they couldn't understand kindness." The authorities arrived on the 4th day. A patrol ship from the Galactic Conservation Corps responding to the smuggler's ship's beacon and the outpost's reports. Captain Okonkwo was a veteran officer, a human woman who had spent decades enforcing wildlife protection laws across multiple systems. She listened to Sarah's report with increasing amazement. "You're telling me," she said slowly, "that you have a fully grown Varkesh living peacefully near your outpost, and that she's allowing you to handle her cubs? Come see for yourself." What Captain Okonkwo witnessed that afternoon would eventually make its way into xenobiology textbooks across human space. Copper, the apex predator who should have been a killing machine, playing with her cubs while Sarah sat nearby taking notes. The smallest cub, leg healing well, climbing onto Sarah's lap to have its bandages checked. The mother watching but not attacking, her patterns showing calm approval. "In 27 years, Okonkwo said quietly, I have never seen anything like this." "Humans have a saying," Sarah replied, watching as the cubs tumbled over each other in play. "We judge a person by how they treat those who can do nothing for them. Maybe that applies across species. We helped her cubs when we could have left them to die, when we could have seen them as just another problem. She understood that. She remembers. The legal questions took weeks to sort out. Varkesh were protected, their removal from Thalkor strictly forbidden. But Copper and her cubs had been taken illegally, and now they were on a different world entirely. Return was possible but risky, especially with the cubs' healing injury. In the end, the Conservation Corps made an unprecedented decision Copper and her cubs would remain on the research moon, protected and monitored, until the cubs were mature enough for the family to be relocated safely. Sarah's outpost transformed. It became a center for xenobiology research, studying the first documented case of cross-species cooperation between humans and Varkesh. Scientists came from across the galaxy to observe. What they found challenged every assumption about predator psychology. Copper was not tame. She was a partnership, a thinking being who had made a choice. She hunted as she needed. She raised her cubs according to Varkesh instinct. But she also recognized the humans as allies, as the ones who had saved her young. She protected the outpost's perimeter from other predators. She allowed limited observation of her family, and when Sarah sat in the evening light, data pad in hand, recording observations, Copper would sometimes settle nearby, her patterns flickering in what Sarah had learned to recognize as the Varkesh equivalent of thoughtful conversation. The cubs grew fast, their scales hardening, their patterns becoming more complex. The injured one, who Sarah had privately named Lucky, remained the most comfortable around humans. It would bring Sarah interesting rocks or unusual plants, like a cat bringing gifts, its 4 eyes bright with what could only be called affection. 6 months after the crash, Captain Okonkwo returned for a follow-up inspection. She found Sarah in the forest clearing that had become Copper's preferred resting spot, the human researcher sitting cross-legged while the 3 juvenile Varkesh practiced their hunting stalks nearby. Copper lay sprawled in a patch of sun, her massive form relaxed, her patterns showing contentment. "You've written a new chapter in xenobiology," Okonkwo said, settling down beside Sarah. "Do you know that?" "I just helped some babies," Sarah replied. "Anyone would have done the same." "No, not anyone." Okonkwo watched as Lucky brought Sarah a large beetle, dropping it in her lap with obvious pride. "Most would have seen a profit opportunity, or a threat to be eliminated. You saw a mother looking for her children. You chose compassion over fear." "Humans have been doing that for millennia," Sarah said. "We domesticated wolves into dogs. We befriended cats. We've formed bonds with dolphins and horses and birds. We have this strange ability to see others as friends instead of threats. Maybe that's our real strength. Not our technology or our weapons, just our willingness to extend a hand instead of a fist." Copper raised her head. Her patterns, shifting to the warm gold that Sarah had learned, meant approval. The massive predator's eyes met Sarah's, and in that gaze was understanding that transcended language. Years would pass. The cubs would grow to adults and eventually choose their own territories. Lucky would remain near the outpost, becoming the first documented case of a wild Varkesh voluntarily cohabitating with another species. Copper would live out her years hunting the forests she had claimed as her own, occasionally returning to the place where humans had once saved her children. But the story would never end. Not really, because it had changed something fundamental. Humans had looked at one of the galaxy's most dangerous predators and seen not a monster, but a mother. They had chosen kindness when fear would have been easier. And in doing so, they had proven something that the rest of the galaxy was only beginning to understand. Humanity's greatest strength was not their technology or their aggression. It was their almost reckless capacity for compassion, their willingness to help, even when it made no strategic sense, their ability to recognize pain in others and choose to ease it, regardless of species or danger. On a research moon orbiting a forgotten world, a predator and her cubs lived free because humans had made that choice. And in the soft evening light, when Sarah sat recording her notes and Copper rested nearby, the scene represented something profound. Not dominance, not domestication, but friendship, freely given and freely accepted. The predator had broken free, ready to kill, but it had found its cubs safe in human hands, and that had changed everything. For the Varkesh, for the humans, and for everyone who would learn this story and understand that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is choose trust over fear, compassion over violence, and hope over hatred. In the end, that choice made all the difference.